Hi everyone, long time no see. Today I'm going to be making a video about toxic parenting, deadbeat dads, and society's expectations of fatherhood. And I was really inspired to have this conversation based on recent dialogue around celebrities like Nick Cannon and Cam Newton that have gone viral recently. And I'm going to be adding my 2 cents on this topic from someone who has an absent father. I've never really talked about this on this channel. I'm very hesitant because of the nature of some dynamics. I don't really want to get cussed out. And let's get started. So what is a deadbeat dad? So it's often defined in terms of this financial element, but it can also be emotional. It can be in a variety of different ways that the father is not present in their child's life. When it comes to the Black community specifically, I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that this conversation around absent Black fathers is not used as a talking point to justify the discrimination, the injustices, the difficulty that the Black community faces. For example, this is something that happens in UK and American media. This conversation around the decline in the traditional Black family structure, these are all quite loaded terms, as the reason that Black men and Black boys join gangs or engage in criminality. We so often hear that conversation point, or that their mothers, there's a hatred of Black mothers, single Black mothers in contrast, and their failure to be there for their children and pick the right men that will help raise the children of their community, particularly the Black boys and the Black men. And this is just a way to avoid actually addressing the social structures. Society blames the individual and this attitude that we lack norms and values, this idea of Black criminality. So in that world, it is a cultural problem as opposed to the economic, social barriers that we face on a day-to-day basis. So just give you a quick summary. It's essentially just blaming Black people for our own marginalization. But just wanted to make that very clear before I get into the deadbeat dad conversation. I'm not a part of your talking point if that's what you believe. We're not in the same space. So I think that society does not view the role of the father as one that is a big role, if that makes sense. And I think that societal expectations of fatherhood is low. So it's then ironic when there are fathers that do not meet up to those expectations, which they have not been encouraged to do so. And there is commentary around that, because the emphasis in these very cis heteronormative dynamics, in cis het relationships with cis men and cis women, the emphasis is always on what the mother is doing, the cooking, the cleaning, the emotional support, making sure that physically you look a certain way, that you look after the husband. There is such a huge weight placed on that role. And I think in contrast, it's not that being a provider, that is the bit. It's the provider or leader in the family structure, which is an economic bit. But there's no mention of what the father must do for his children emotionally, or be present for them emotionally, and his wife. And before we continue, I think it's important to mention that I'm not of the attitude that you need a father to raise a child, because I do feel in these conservative conversations that is what they're effectively saying, that a mother, or even women, because there can be family structures that are not centered around a man, where a man is not present, or that men, like a male couple, are not capable. This is essentially what they believe, isn't it? Are not capable or not suited to raise a child. There needs to be a woman there. Discrimination is what that is reflective of. And my point is more so that I feel that there is a psychological impact when a parent is absent, period. When a parent is absent, what is the consequences of that? And I really feel that this can link to emotional unavailability. Property, the work, power over women. That there is not this emphasis on an emotional involvement and shared parenting that I think today some are supportive of, or even just seeing in those cis heteronormative dynamics a father who is the one who stays at home, or a father picking up his son from school. These are things that some still see as the women's role, but also that was less likely to be there in the past. And I think because of patriarchy and those patriarchal expectations, especially in British society, work and property ownership was and still is really a key part of how gender roles and dynamics in the family have been cemented, because of the discrimination that women face in the workplace, but also work not being seen as the women's space, or space that women can do well in. These are the white Western models. But we know that when it comes to race, class, and gender, and this makes me think of Angela Davis's book, for Black men and Black women, our relationships to labour during slavery were one where there were similarities, because Black women also worked in the fields as did the Black men. And I think that Black women have always been expected to contribute to the family economically. But on a whole, I think societal expectations and its low expectations of fatherhood can mean that we are harder on mothers and expect less of our fathers, where you have people like Nick Cannon and Cam Newton who act selfishly and do not consider how their actions impact their children. If you don't have time to be there for every moment of your children's lives, don't, like, in terms of Cam Newton, when he was saying that he wants to have more children, but he's not there for the kids that he already has. And I do feel that this is to some degree a reflection of how men and their sense of self is based on their relationship to women, and women are often used as vessels for that lostness and insecurities to pass time and avoid addressing their emotions and own issues. And that should not be the case. You should take that time out and work on yourself, how you view yourself outside of this kind of toxic masculinity and how you interact with women. And as I slightly touched on, I grew up in a single parent household. I bloody hate the way that people talk about Black women, particularly in single parent dynamics, because they are so often framed as the villains, but they're the ones that stayed and stuck by us. And I think it's used to score policy campaigning points. And it's also interesting how single fathers are shown more understanding and empathy. But for Black women especially, they are seen as a reason for the decline of the Black family. And not to mention also, as I briefly touched on, around the anti-LGBT narratives, but there being Black women, there's always this attitude that, for example, in explaining why Black gay men exist, that they were around too much women. Absolutely ridiculous, but just to give you a sense of the just annoyingness that takes place in this space around sort of family in the Black community. And when you have a parent that is not there for you, it's just disappointing. It definitely has an impact. But I think Gen Zs and millennials, we recognize that we can't change our parents. We can't make our parents be people that they're not. And I also understand the layers of it, that what do they experience? What, I don't know, that make them this way, that make them emotionally unavailable or not want to be present or all of that. And in conclusion, I think that parents of all genders should understand how important the role of a parent is. It's not a decision that should be taken lightly. And there's something to be said around society's expectations of fathers being very low, and that is then reflected in their behaviour and the failure to show up in the way that they should. And being there economically is not enough, or even just physically being there. Because I talk to some of my friends whose parents are together and the dad is there, but they're not there for them. So there is definitely a whole conversation around fatherhood that I briefly touched on in this video. Please let me know what you think of this video below. Can you relate in any kind of way? And sure, you know, we want to have good relationships with our parents, but that does not mean that we should accept bad behaviour because we're related. And at the end of the day, you can always hope that things improve and one day things are easier. And I'm just sharing a little element of my experience of the world. Bye!